Thank you for downloading the Drone Radio Show podcast. Because of great listeners like you, my podcast recently surpassed 1 million downloads, which I'm extremely grateful. If you're a regular listener of the show, I'd like to get your feedback on how to make it better. Please take the Drone Radio Show podcast survey found on the podcast webpage at www.droneradioshow.com. Thanks again for your continued support. Now on to today's podcast.
And actually, that same asset can fly up to 340 hours, right? So we were always designing for that. The 12 hours was one of the points to kind of cross in order to get to perpetual assets. We want these assets flying for months and years.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 360. Is a perpetual flying drone possible? Today's guest not only believes it's possible, it's already here. Fatema Hamdani is co-founder and president of Kraus Hamdani Aerospace, a San Francisco-based leader in ultra-long endurance unmanned aerial systems. Founded in 2016, the company has created its flagship product, the K1000 ULE, a zero-emissions drone flying longer than any other electric aircraft in its category. Having recently broken the world record for an electric drone in its size and weight category, the K1000 ULE can travel longer distances, stay in flight longer, and at higher altitudes, making them ideal for jobs that are risky for humans, such as disaster relief efforts, search and recovery, military intelligence and reconnaissance, wildlife anti-poaching operations, and even human trafficking prevention. Fatema's experience spans across the aerospace, financial services, life science, telecom, travel, and retail domains. Under her leadership, the company is reinventing ultra-long endurance UAS using artificial intelligence, machine learning, and biomimicry to create drones that can stay aloft almost indefinitely. In this edition of the Drone Radio Show, Fatema talks about Kraus Hamdani Aerospace, the K1000 ULE, and the company's plans for the future. But before we hear from Fatema, I want to thank those of you who are supporting my funding campaign. Whether it's $1, $100, or much more, you can help defray the cost of production and keep the podcast going and growing. Go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And by the way, if you have a great story on the use of drones that you'd like to share in a podcast, contact me at randy@droneradioshow.com. So let's learn about ultra-long endurance UAS systems with Fatema Hamdani of Kraus Hamdani Aerospace. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Fatema to introduce herself.
Fatema Hamdani. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Kraus Hamdani Aerospace.
Fatema, tell us about Kraus Hamdani Aerospace. What does the company do?
We design, we manufacture long-endurance unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs. In layman term, large fixed-wing drones. So that's what we do, as well as harnessing the power of long-endurance beyond line of sight platforms for data and intelligence and communication.
And when you say long endurance, what does that mean?
It varies, right? A lot of folks use the term long endurance and they talk about a few hours. Our current asset, which is currently in production and flying, the K1000 Ultra Long Endurance Revision P, has already flown nonstop for 26 hours and has the ability to fly up to 340 hours nonstop, depending on the latitude it's flying in.
Why do we need a drone that flies 26 hours or more?
So here's what's interesting, Randy. The amount of money that is being spent on satellites. The whole reason we are putting up satellites and the whole purpose of putting up satellites in orbits is an ability to create perpetual services, right? Whether that be wireless services, whether that be data gathering, intelligence. If with what we are doing, long endurance of 26 hours or up to 340 hours, we're essentially creating pseudo satellites, satellites that don't need orbit, as well as when you're collecting data and intelligence over a large area, you want the ability to persistently monitor changes. Now, let's think about wildfires. Close to home, all of us can relate to natural disasters that are kind of plaguing most of the world. If you're able to monitor large areas persistently for long duration and are able to catch things early, you can prevent catastrophes. When fires are happening and managing fires so that you don't send out the first responders in harm's way or you don't send out manned aircraft over smoke, you're able to monitor for as long as the fire is going on and are able to send very accurate geolocated information. Over time, are able to monitor how winds change and how that has an impact on fire, and are able to predict that kind of change over time. After the disaster, when there is rebuilding happening and the likes of FEMA or others that are coming in to help with that rebuild need data and information. If you're sending a drone out for 2 hours, what kind of data would you gather? And that's where you need long endurance assets such as ours that can fly beyond line of sight, that can operate, that can extend communication networks and collect data while doing that.
Yeah, that's pretty significant, especially those two examples. People may not be aware, but a lot of times the airspace over a disaster area is restricted, particularly following a hurricane, and flying a drone may not be possible.
Exactly. And communication falters. When the hurricane hit Puerto Rico, they had supplies, but the communication was broken. They couldn't manage the distribution of the supplies properly. Our first responders, usually firefighters, are carrying 5 pieces of heavy radio equipment on their self while they're trying to run in and take the fire down because of communication failing. When we started the company 6 years ago, there were 4 massive issues that we knew if we could solve for, we would exponentially be changing how we look at UAVs and what they can do for us. How far the UAV can travel from the operator, how long it can stay up in terms of endurance, how easy is it to integrate things into the UAV, payload, sensors, radios, open architecture. Both Stefan, my business partner, and I come from software as a service, open API world. So how could we leverage that in an architecture for a UAV? And then finally, operational footprint. If you need a team of 25 trying to operate a UAV, you might not have anybody in the cockpit, but it's not unmanned, right? And so autonomy and truly getting ahead of autonomy and how machine-to-machine teaming and human-to-machine teaming would happen has to be central of why we're building these assets.
When you look back at the objectives that were established 6 years ago, how do you characterize the progress?
So we've definitely exceeded it. But what is interesting is we've created a whole different class. So we are our own competition. So we have to keep upping that. Today, we're flying the longest endurance unmanned aerial platform in its size and weight category, 100% electric in the world. And not just that, recently we completed our VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing. And we've never been proponents of VTOL, but some of our customers, especially the US DoD, requires it. And so we do have modules that kind of go on to the current aircraft and gives it the ability to take off vertically and land vertically, and then switch to fixed wing component. But today we're also flying the longest endurance VTOL asset in the world in our size and weight category.
Let's talk about the aircraft. Can you describe it for us?
Our wingspan is 16 and a half feet. It's a fixed wing asset, as well as if you think about it as a glider. A lot of folks know glider planes. We've learned a lot from nature. I come from the software world, and one of the things I learned early on when I was building a consulting firm and a data and intelligence organization, simple systems, well thought out systems are the most elegant. And when you look into nature and how nature does things, these are simple, elegant systems. Whether it's, a bird flying in a swarm or bird flying long distances and not flapping their wings to conserve energy and riding thermals or, and so that's what we took as fundamental principles. We wanted to create the most efficient bird out there.
Was the concept of biomimicry always part of the approach, or did that evolve?
No, it was always the core. My business partner built his first glider plane when he was 7 years old with his dad. And since then, the aerospace bug kind of bit him, but he wanted to build the most efficient aircraft. As well as what's interesting is the mission of the company is saving lives. We are a triple bottom line company. For us, people, planet, and profit are all equally important. So building the most green asset that's flying out there was core to this. And in order for us to do all of that while building an asset that actually performs certain functionality. What's interesting is you have these long endurance aircraft that have been built that carry a toothpick that's not built around functionality. Why are we flying these robots persistently? To collect data, to provide intelligence, to provide communication. If we can't do that, there is no point for us to fly 26 hours. And so that is the core of everything we do, functionality and then efficiency.
How much does the vehicle weigh?
The all-up weight ranges between 32 to 34, depending on the payload and sensor that we carry, and the current asset. What's also beautiful and elegant is we sit on the entire stack, right? The hardware, the software. Our engineers are some of the lead engineers of the largest autopilot in the world, ArduPilot. In addition, the aerodynamics piece. So there are a lot of components we've built that have been built in a way that will scale up from a size, weight, and power ability of the asset, as well as altitudes. We want to become that connective tissue that connects sea, land, air, and space. We don't care if nobody knows our name, but a lot of this connection and machine to machine and human to machine teaming, if you're able to enable, we truly will shrink that gap between data and decision making so that lives can be saved, starting with warfighters, civilians, wildlife anti-poaching, search and rescue, disaster management. We recently helped and apprehend sex traffickers. That truly is why we are doing every day what we're doing.
Now, 2 years ago, the company flew a drone 12 hours, and last year it registered 26 hours. What improvements did you make that factored into more than doubling the flight time in 1 year?
And actually, that same asset can fly up to 340 hours, right? So we were always designing for that. The 12 hours was one of the points to kind of cross in order to get to perpetual assets. We want these assets flying for months and years. And that's what we are planning for. So this is the 26 to 340 hours is another component to get to perpetual flight. And so right now, if you're flying 26 hours, that means you've flown through the night. We're a perpetual asset. Right? Of course, there are aspects of latitude and other components that come into consideration, but being able to carry what we're carrying in terms of the size, weight, and the power that we provide to the payload sensors and radios is truly changing how perpetual flying robots need to behave. So when we sit on the entire stack, everything from motor to props to how the battery management happens, how the solar panels are integrated, how the aerodynamics of the aircraft, everything is thought about from an efficiency, long endurance, and the functionality it is providing.
How is the vehicle able to fly so long?
Obviously, it's 100% electric. So we start with the battery to start with, right? We've worked with lithium ion, lithium polymer. We've kind of come back with cell configuration. We've worked with our battery manufacturers closely from a weight to power comparison and how do we optimize that. Then there are multiple angles that we focus on. How do we create surplus energy on board, which is we're all constantly creating more power or more energy on board than we need, both from flight as well as payloads and sensors perspective. And we've utilized multiple different energy sources, starting with photovoltaics or solar. We're using the most sophisticated triple junction photovoltaics or solar panels. And the aircraft is designed in a way that optimizes because the way a solar panel, and the angle of the sun, and that's why the triple junction component comes in from a photovoltaics perspective. So truly optimizing all of it to generate the most. In addition, considering things like we're creating heat sink on board, is there a way we can cool things in an optimized way and then utilize the airflow and then kind of bring that in? In addition to all of that, when we talk about biomimicry, we are constantly monitoring environmental conditions, have sensors on board that are monitoring environmental conditions and algorithmically feeding that back into the autopilot. We create 3D models on board and feed that back into the autopilot so that we can optimize. We're using thrust 10 to 20% of the flight time. However, we don't compromise on the mission or the functionality. If we have to make speed dash, we will use power, right? Or if we have to go up against heavy winds, we will use power. But simultaneously, when we can station keep as well as utilize environmental conditions for that to happen, we will optimize.
Because batteries are so heavy, how do you determine the right number of batteries versus photovoltaic cells that are on the vehicle?
The cell configuration definitely matters, right? And how do we have that cell configuration to optimize weight to power? And then obviously managing. So we build our power management system that allows us to optimize for recharging, storing extra, as well as powering power-hungry payloads and sensors. We perform electronic warfare, signal intelligence, monitor RF. All of these are fairly power. We have GPU-based edge processing capability as well. So we're layering in data from an AI and intelligence perspective so that we can give actionable intelligence back to our customers. All of this is power hungry.
And everything is controlled by AI. Is that correct?
Yes, there is a lot of intelligence that has been built in. And that's where us sitting on the autopilot side has given us a lot of advantage. And it's an open source autopilot. So we're able to get tons of testing over a weekend when we open it up to the open source community.
Is the vehicle in production? Is it being used today by anyone?
So we do work with the US DoD quite extensively. And I can share some of this because some of this has already been in press. We've worked with the US Army where we became the primary network. Army has this particular exercise that's called Project Convergence. And we were part of PC-21 last year, where there were multiple assets that come together for a multi-domain task force, as the US DoD calls it. So you have multiple different land-based assets, ground-based troops, air-based assets. Because we were flying, we were able to bridge all different waveforms from a radio perspective. There was Silvis, there was Trellisware, there was other radios. We had the radio bridge on top, so nobody had to worry about how they would connect to these disparate waveforms. Simultaneously, we extended the capabilities. There was another asset that was flying, and they had a range of 10 kilometers from their ground control station. Because we were flying, we allowed them to extend that range to 50 kilometers. And we could have done it more. That is all that we had the clearance for. I was giving you the example of just with 2 days of flight, arresting or apprehending sex traffickers. We recently are part of, and I can't name the customer on this one, but part of monitoring oil and gas pipeline. We were part of the largest tender that's ever been awarded in all of GCC countries. But where this aligns with our mission and goal, the current administration is is really mindful of methane monitoring or carbon monitoring when we are talking about sustainability and climate change. To have an asset such as ours that can fly across different altitudes and capture data, the kind of data we can capture from a climate perspective has never been available before. Methane monitoring, carbon monitoring, greenhouse gases monitoring. We're talking to another payload and sensor company that will allow us to eventually monitor up to 350 kilometers upwards so we can help contribute in monitoring space debris.
That's all very interesting. Can you tell us how the system is used to monitor wildlife poaching?
So we've been talking to one of our partners, Zambezi Partners, and we've actually also partnered with Microsoft's Project 15. And so when you're talking about something like poaching, when money has been funneled into, say, Kruger or Africa, it's more feet on the ground. You keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results. That's not going to happen. So truly bringing in technology such as ours, technology such as what Microsoft is doing and others, to come in and bring in intelligence. Let's talk about elephants. Rewilding of elephants. When elephants get spooked, they behave in a certain manner. If you're able to constantly collect that data, feed that back, and train your algorithms from a machine learning perspective to detect when an elephant herd gets spooked, even if you can't see the poacher, you're able to signal that back and make sure you have communication on board so you can get the rangers to the herd in time before the poachers get to them. That's how you change the game.
What is aerial intelligence, and how does Kraus Hamdani Aerospace apply it?
So aerial intelligence is the ability to collect data from an aerial asset such as ours and process it on board using edge processing capability. So you are actually monitoring whether it's change or what I use as an example for rewilding of elephant. I don't have to send out the full motion video. I can continuously keep monitoring the elephants. And when something goes out of the ordinary, that's when I send the intelligence back or activate another asset based on the intelligence that is being gathered on board.
What's next for Kraus Hamdani Aerospace?
The ability for us to, as I had mentioned, grow from a size, weight, and power and altitude. We are looking to have a high altitude asset flying in the next 24 months. And we are a 100% US industrial based company. So that truly is extremely critical for our national security.
And for my last question, Fatema, what message would you like to leave regarding the future of the drone industry?
It's about truly focusing on the why, the so what of technology, right? I mean, it's very cool technology and all of us can get very excited. But when we're looking at it from commercializing, when we're looking at it to solve real world problem, keeping that central, the so what of technology is what I think all of us really need to focus in on. And that's how we become responsible contributors and further the industry.
That's it for episode 360 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Fatema Hamdani of Kraus Hamdani Aerospace. I want to thank Fatema for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about Kraus Hamdani Aerospace or want to connect with Fatema, check out the website at krausaerospace.com. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1, you can help defray the cost of production. To donate, go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Goers.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.